Coming up on The Returned.
A profound one was the Soho bombing
Mm-hmm.
experience, because that was witnessed by 4 other people who I was
Mm-hmm.
teaching one of my techniques. I just became overwhelmed by this sort of energy, and I went down onto the ground and just went straight into an out-of-body experience. And it was one of the deepest trance states that I've ever experienced. I found myself in Soho on Old Compton Street, which is the main street running through Soho. And I
Mm-hmm.
saw the explosion, and then I saw the chaos ensue, and I felt this sort of intense emotional wave hit me, like I was feeling the anguish and the energy of the people who'd been injured and killed in the explosion. And then I went into a kind of void-like, womb-like sort of trance state.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. Here's to everything we'll discover together. Hi, and welcome to The Returned. If you're new here, I'm MJ, and here we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and lightworkers from around the world. Today, I'm excited to welcome a truly fascinating guest, Graham Nicholls. Graham is an author, artist, and recognized expert on out-of-body experiences. Having studied and explored out-of-body experiences since 1987, what makes his story so compelling is that he's quite literally been out and returned to himself over and over again, each time bringing back new insights into the nature of consciousness and what it means to truly awaken. Graham, thank you so much for being here today.
It's really good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. For anyone who's just discovering your work, Graham, can you take us back to what first set you on this path? Was there a moment or an experience that really opened your eyes to this other layer of reality?
I think it started for me really with spontaneous experiences when I was even from the age of around 5, not out of body experiences, but I saw an apparition when I was about 5 years old. I had certain insights, which I don't really remember the details of them, but they may have related to past life memories and things like that when I was around that age as well. And then as I got older, it developed in different ways. And one of the ways was I started to have spontaneous out of body experiences. Only a few, but it was enough to kind of spark my interest. I would find myself, I would just lay down after going to school or something like that. Would just lay down in my bedroom. And then I went into a kind of trance state, a light trance state, which is pretty much still how I have out of body experiences. And then I found I would just find myself in a different location, usually around half a mile from where I lived. So it wasn't in my bedroom. It wasn't the usual floating above myself, looking back that many people describe. I found myself at quite a distance. So near my school, actually near my primary school. And then, I would just find myself floating in the air, only about a foot off the ground, and I was in a vertical position. So I would sort of look around the environment, be amazed that I'm there, kind of realizing that I was seeing very vividly. It wasn't like a dream. I was sort of conscious that I wasn't asleep, and then I would come back to my body, and it would be over again. So yeah, it was a very, they were very fleeting, but then sometime around half a year or a year after that, I discovered that there was the concept of out of body experiences, and I basically spent a lot of time learning all about it. I got a book on the topic, and I started to study, and spent the next 6 months trying to induce one intentionally, and then eventually I did induce one intentionally, and that's how it all started, really.
So interesting. Is that the tall figure in the doorway that you're mentioning that
Yeah,
you saw at that age?
yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. Almost like it was standing between two worlds with you.
Yeah, it was in the doorway, so looking at it in a sort of almost symbolic way, it did feel like it was at a threshold, literally representing between two worlds, like you say. And
Mm-hmm.
I try to resist interpreting it too much
Right.
with my modern mind, but it did have certain characteristics that you might associate with a shaman or something like that. I remember feathers, possibly, or rags, or, it had kind of a texture to the clothing that it was wearing, that it wasn't just flat fabric, it sort of had things attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it was actually terrifying at the time. I was very scared, and I didn't know what to do. I'd never experienced anything like that. I felt. I remember going onto the ground to get some sense of solidity because
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know what to do. Um, but I guess after that, I became more comfortable with these kinds of experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any fear related to them anymore. But it was natural, I guess, as a kid to have that kind of reaction.
Absolutely. I love that you talk about the not rushing to label and explain those types of mysterious things. Do you believe that the willingness to just live with the unknown has shaped the way you approach both personal growth and research?
Yeah, I think it has. I think it's very important to have that sort of beginner's mind, as they say, sort of the Zen concept of the beginner's
Mm-hmm.
mind. I really believe in that because I think if you we have a tendency to want to understand everything, and that's actually, I think, humanity's biggest mistake. It's the thing
Mm-hmm.
that we always do, and when we do that, we go down a particular path, and then we start to sort of divide ourselves up by, I think it's this and I think it's that, and it gets, we can get very lost in those kinds of things, and I don't think there's any real benefit to it. We don't need to have all of the answers. I think it's far better to keep exploring and to keep open. So yeah, I think it
Mm-hmm.
does give a lot to what I do, I think, and it also allows for new discovery, which is
Yeah.
amazing. It's like I haven't got
Mm-hmm.
everything tied in bows. It's like this is how it is.
Right.
I'm always open to new possibilities and going in new directions, and I think that keeps this whole area fascinating as well.
Mm. Absolutely fascinating. I've never had an out of body experience aside from dreaming, where I'm a very lucid dreamer. So, is that an out of body experience in your opinion?
No.
I was
um,
wondering that. Yeah.
no, I think lucid dreams are different things.
Hmm.
What I would say is that consciousness is on a continuum.
Hmm.
There are all different states of consciousness. So it's a bit like, is a dream state related to the conscious waking state? Well, I would say yes, there is a relationship, but they are different
Hmm.
things. And I think that's also true with an out of body experience. There's a relationship, but they have distinct differences, and they do exist in a slightly different context. You can access an out of body experience through a lucid dream, but you can also access an out of body experience through the waking state, or a meditational state, or a hypnotic state, or even a cardiac
Right.
arrest. So there are many ways to access the out of body experience. So I think that there has been an increase in confusion about the relationship between dreams and out of body
Hmm.
experiences. But I think that's just because people have realized that can be a useful avenue to get to that state. Um, so it's caused a certain degree of confusion. But I think when you consider that people have these experiences from so many different states, I think it
Hmm.
becomes clearer that they're not the same thing.
When you leave your body, um, what and where can you go?
Um, Potentially, I think pretty much anywhere. But I would put a caveat on that it does depend on the quality and the depth of the experience that I'm having.
Mm-hmm.
So in some experiences, they can be what I would call peak experiences, the very, very vivid, powerful, transformative experiences. They don't happen every day. I
Right.
want to make that clear because I think it can give a false impression to people if they think that these things are sort of everyday occurrences. I think these peak experiences are more when everything is in flow and everything is attuned and um, you know, I'm
Mm.
sure everyone has had those rare experiences, moments of insight, synchronicities, intuitions, all of these kinds of things where something has been a peak rare moment in your life that's kind of
Uh-huh.
sent you in a different direction. And I think the peak out of body experiences are more like that. They're not sort of an everyday occurrence. But then my everyday out of body experiences, they can be on all different levels as well. I tend to go with the flow with my experiences a lot more now because I find
Okay.
it's amazing to do that because I never know what kind of experience might happen, where I might end up, what I might see. So I tend to go with it. It can be in a physical reality. It can also be in a non-physical reality. There is a bit of a misconception about my work sometimes that people think I only have OBEs on the physical. That's not true, but I
Okay.
focus on the physical in the sense that I focus on things that can be verified and that I can kind of work with in terms of evidence and science, because I'm interested in understanding the experience. And if we only talk about things on a different level, it can become very subjective and it can be very hard to know whether that was really an objective experience or something purely happening in your mind or my mind
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. So I focus on the more verifiable objective experiences for that reason, and also because I'm rare in the sense that I've been able to demonstrate them on multiple occasions and also do scientific work and also
Mm-hmm.
um, have witnesses and things to my experiences. So I think that's something important in my experience that I can share and I can give that very few people can.
Yeah, one thing that really makes your work stand out is your focus on the vertical OBEs. That's what you're talking about,
Hmm.
correct?
Yeah,
Those moments where you see and you experience, but you can confirm something that's happening in real life,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, like when others say that they're coming out and they go and they're going to heaven or they're going to the afterlife or they're going to 12 layers up or levels up or higher consciousness, do you believe we can actually do those things?
I think that there is a danger of self delusion, I would say, in
Okay.
those
Hmm.
kinds of things. But having said that, there are ways that we can verify those other levels as well. For example, shared experiences. That's one way that we could, verify that kind of environment. Another example is if we perceive something in that other level that then we can verify in physical reality. So an example of
Hmm.
that was the plane crash experience I had, where um, I saw a group of about, I estimated it, I think, to be about 140, 150 people, um, who were in a group. They were in a cloud-like environment. So it was on another level. I was in this, what I perceived to be an afterlife level, like an early stage of an
Okay.
afterlife type environment.
Okay.
It looked very stereotypical, clouds and no real up and down. It was just this sort of very serene, beautiful environment. But these people seemed confused. Some seemed stressed. They didn't seem to know what was going on. I was at a distance to them, which was interesting as well, because it was almost like I couldn't come I couldn't come too close. If I went past a certain point, it was like I wouldn't be able to come back. That was how I interpreted it.
Oh, wow.
Um, but I was watching them and they were having life reviews, which is a characteristic of near-death experiences. So
Yeah.
I was literally seeing images and moments, what I perceived as memories from their lives. So there was a man in particular who was seemed to be struggling with a man who looked very similar to him but older, so I interpreted it as being his father. And
Mm.
he was struggling with this relationship that he had with him. And then on another side of the group, there was a woman who just seemed to move off, and she didn't seem to have any struggle with this situation. But so I interpreted them as being probably Slavic, from a Slavic country of some description, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that they died very quickly, like in a, like an
Mm-hmm.
accident. Um, when I came out of the out of body experience, I remember I think I walked into the living room and the television was on, and there was a report going on about a crash in Svalbard, which is an island, part of Norway. Um, and the people who had died in the crash were mainly miners. So they were from Ukraine, I believe, Russia and Ukraine, that kind of area. So it confirmed what I'd seen in the experience. So this was an experience that happened on a different level, but then it was confirmed on a physical level. So that's an example of when you can even get evidence of another level. But I
Right.
guess there was a different quality to that, I would say, to what I've experienced when I've been on what most people refer to as the astral. That kind of, I tend to call it the
Mm-hmm.
transphysical. I just see it as
Mm-hmm.
another level rather than, I don't go in these terms like astral come from theosophy, and I don't really buy into theosophy and those kinds of things. So
Okay.
I tend to not use that terminology, and it also implies an astral body, which I don't really think exists. um,
Interesting. Yeah.
we can get
Cool.
into that, but
Yeah.
essentially, I came to the conclusion that the crash that I'd seen was that one that actually happened. So yeah, so these levels do have a different quality to them. So what I look out for now is I look out for specific types of qualities of those other levels, and then I will be more open to the possibility of it being an objective space rather than a subjective space. I mean, if you actually go back, talking of theosophy, if you go back into the writings, sort of theosophical writings, like A.E. Powell, people like that, they did actually say that the astral was an illusory level, that it wasn't an
Okay.
objective space. So, that was the general belief in the past as well. So what I'm saying actually goes along with some of the older esoteric writings in that sense.
Back to your experience when you basically seen a premonition, is that a certain type of OBE when you see a premonition that actually happens?
I think it, at least in my case, that it's not a common feature of an out of
Mm-hmm.
body experience, but I've had two experiences, both when I lived in London and both related to terrorist attacks in London.
Mm-hmm.
One was a far right extremist who
Mm-hmm.
did a bombing in the gay district of London in Soho, and the other was uh, a terrorist attack with Muslim terrorists in 2005. We call it 7/7 because that was the date. So again, those two events, I had precognitive out of body experiences of both of them. So those are the two that I've had. But the most profound one was the Soho bombing
Mm-hmm.
experience, because that was witnessed by four other people who I was
Mm-hmm.
teaching one of my techniques. They were close friends of mine. We'd hired this room and I was teaching these methods, and I just became overwhelmed by this sort of energy, and I went down onto the ground and just went straight into an out of body experience. And it was one of the deepest trance states that I've ever experienced. It took me quite a while to come out of it. The two of the people there, a guy called Chris and Lawrence, had to kind of
Mm-hmm.
coax me out. In the video I made about it, which people can see on my website or
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, Lawrence, one of the people who was there, he talks about his memory of the event, so you can see one of the witnesses giving their feedback as well. But basically, I went out of body. I found myself in Soho on Old Compton Street, which is the main street running through Soho. And I
Mhm.
saw the explosion, and then I saw the chaos ensue. And I felt this sort of intense emotional wave hit me, like I was feeling the anguish and the energy of the people who'd been injured and killed in the explosion. And then I went into a kind of void like, womb like sort of trance state. And like I just mentioned, my two friends sort of slowly coaxed me out of it, but it took a while for me to come out of that state. So it was probably one of the deepest, most profound experiences I've had.
Graham,
And then
I did.
five
Oh,
days,
sorry.
sorry,
Sorry,
and
you
then
go
five
ahead.
days later, the actual bombing happened. I should add in, obviously, that's the important element of that.
I did read your article. There was an article written, actually, it was an interview. I think it was with the Swedenborg Foundation.
Oh
And
yeah.
I did read that story. And I was actually, it blew my mind. And like, I did write a bunch of questions that I wanted to ask you. You pretty much answered them all. But one thing I really would like to know is I know you don't want to put a name or anything to it, but do you think there's something bigger at work here that does that to you? Or even so, how about saying, do you think that there was a like a plan for you to be this way?
I don't feel like there was a plan. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm very resistant to
Mm-hmm.
plans and things
That's
like
okay.
that.
Yeah.
It kind of, I don't really feel a reason to go down that road. I haven't sort of
Yeah.
seen anything to suggest that in my life, really.
Sure.
Um, but in terms of something guiding, I have, I guess, in my life felt some sense of that, and maybe something like a guide an archetype that kind of oversees some aspect of my life. So yeah, I can relate to that. Obviously, again, that's something that's purely subjective to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't tell anyone else to believe that or to, you know,
Exactly.
but
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I would say in my personal spirituality, that's something that I'm fairly comfortable with.
Why do you think that this was put onto you from that early age? And do you have an idea what it was for?
I don't know. I don't know why
Mm-hmm.
it happened to me. I've thought about that quite a lot. Um, in terms of, I even went into at one point. I grew up in a tower block, 20-story building in
Mm-hmm.
London. Um, sort of public housing. It it had a very strange sort of structure to it. Because
Mm-hmm.
essentially the building was quite badly put together and it started falling apart at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they had to kind of rebuild the outside. The building still stands, but it's got almost like a straight jacket almost on it, this
Oh,
building,
wow.
to kind of hold it together because it was kind of falling apart. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, one of the windows in my mother's bedroom fell out. Just to give you an idea, it was a
Oh,
bad
wow.
building anyway. Um, and I've often wondered if even the structure of that building in some way uh, had some impact. I've often thought about things like, it's almost like an antenna. When you look at it from above, it's got these metal structure kind of sticking out the top of it. It's it's almost like an antenna or some kind of I wondered if it had an interesting electromagnetic field or
Mm.
something like that. I've wondered all these kinds of things. There was also a famous haunting on the 12th floor that
Oh.
my mum was able to verify as well, because my mother was a carer and she used to look after the woman who lived in that particular flat on the 12th floor. And then when the woman died, a new mother and daughter moved into the flat, and basically they described seeing this old woman moving around in the apartment, and they described the old woman to my mother, and it was correct in every detail of what the woman looked like. So yeah, it was an unusual building. There was some interesting phenomena used to go on with that building. So I've wondered if that could have had something to do with it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You're an amazing, amazing man. Yeah,
thank you.
it's very, very much so. After experiences that you mentioned, like ending up in the void state with your friends having to help you, um, how did you handle overwhelming moments?
Um, that did take a while to process that the Soho experience. So it was a very challenging experience intellectually, emotionally, on every level, really, because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really believe in precognition. And then this thing happens to me that you can't really deny, especially when exactly what I'd seen happened 5 days later. 5 days is not a lot of time. It's not even a week, and then this thing happened, um, and it was exactly as I'd seen it, the same position on the road, um, you know, same distance from where I was standing, kind of, same road, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that really, really, and I also said it was in a bar, so that was another thing which was correct in the actual real event. So um, I couldn't get my head around how that could be possible, and I went through all kinds of, could I have telepathically linked in with the person who eventually did it, or all different kinds of ways of getting around that it was precognitive. I kind of looked at and. Um, Yeah, but then I guess when I had the 7/7 experience, which
Mm-hmm.
was like 6 years later, um, I really couldn't deny that one because it was a longer period of time ahead of it, and again, I saw these specific details. Like in that one, I actually followed. It was on a train, so I actually followed the train through the tunnel on the London Underground. So I literally followed it along the tunnel. And then again, I stopped at a distance. There's this consistency of this distance
Mm-hmm.
in multiple of my experiences. The plane crash one, the
Mm-hmm.
one with the Soho one, and then this one as well. They all had this distance to them, where I was sort of at a safe distance, if you like. And then
Mm-hmm.
that was turned out to also be correct and happened as I'd seen it. So those were all my precognitive experiences, or very powerful sort of verified ones.
What's the distance mean to you when you think about why you aren't able to go a little bit further? What do you think that is?
Well, in the one in the afterlife type environment, I guess I assumed that it just meant if I passed. I mean, many people in near-death experiences talk about a similar thing, that they
Mhm.
felt if they'd continued on any further, then they wouldn't have been able to return.
That's
So
right.
I guess I interpreted it in that kind of context, that I felt that if I went further, I wouldn't be able to return. And in the precognitive experiences, maybe it was, again, so that I wasn't implicated in the experience. I was observing it or being aware of it, but I wasn't ultimately going to be one of the people who was caught up in it directly.
I see.
So that's
Mhm.
maybe how I've interpreted that.
I see. So looking back now, at those difficult times and those unfortunate events, do you feel that it was necessary for your growth or
I don't think it was
have
necessary for my growth,
no?
but I
Okay.
used it in that way. I drew upon those experiences to think about things like violence, non-violence. It led me into thinking about things like ahimsa, the Gandhi's philosophy, or not specifically Gandhi, but you see it in Jainism and Hinduism, this idea of living it with non-violence.
Mhm.
Um, so in Jain tradition, for example, in India, they literally will brush the street in front of them as they walk so that they don't kill any insects. It's absolute like pure mindfulness to kind of respect and um, value all life. So they have this very, very deep practice based on nonviolence, and that had an impact on me as well. The first time I went to India, I was 19, and I met a Jain practitioner at that time, and that sort of had an impact on me. And then people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Leo
Mhm.
Tolstoy as well. Leo Tolstoy had a whole idea based around nonviolence as well. Not many people know that about him, but he was vegetarian, he was an anarchist, and he was very into this nonviolent philosophy. So I started to read and explore all of these kinds of ideas. And then I guess I had a very powerful spiritual awakening in Sardinia in
Mhm.
2002. And
Mhm.
that, I think that laid the foundations for my work now that I wanted to start. I started working on my first book, Avenues of the Human Spirit, which is more about my own journey and philosophy and that side of my work. So um, I started working on that book, which took quite a few years, although it's quite a short book. It took a long time for me to be happy with how I articulated things and how I put them across in that book. So yeah, so I started work on that and then became involved in activism and all different kinds of things, became vegan. So it had a big impact on my life in terms of thinking about
Mhm.
why people do bad things, I guess.
Yeah, I did read about that actually, and I had noted here that you had a dramatic vision, but it was a subtler shift during meditation that ended up changing your whole direction of in life, correct?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you tell us how did it lead you to focus more on compassion and humanitarian work?
How did that particular experience,
Yeah,
the
Sardinia,
um,
yeah.
because I guess it, it it gave me what I would say was the core of spirituality or the core of humanity, if you like. And that
Mhm.
essentially is, in my understanding, is benevolence or the golden rule. Um, treat others as you would be treated yourself. But I think what that stems from is a realization of yourself as another, as you're essentially understanding yourself in the position of another. So instead of seeing me and everyone else, it's kind of like realizing that, like, real pure empathy, where you
Mhm.
realize that that other person looking back at you is in essentially the same position as you. They're having the same lived experience on some level that you are. They have that conscious awareness. And not even just humans, like, non-humans as well. So I realized that beings want to exist, they want to express, they want to live. And there's this kind of mutual awareness of that when you have that realization of that kind of empathy. So I guess
Mhm.
that experience, it was a subtle shift in that sense, but it was a profound shift because I realized in that moment that I saw the world in that I from that moment on I would really see the world and interact with the world in that way. And so once you have that sense of empathy and that sense of seeing others as you see yourself, then compassion, non-violence, those kinds of things, they just fall out of that. They just express out of that naturally. You don't have to intellectualize about it. It's just when you have that realization, it just becomes a truth in your life, I think. So that was
Yeah.
maybe where it took me.
That's something I never knew was a thing, to be honest with you. But lately, just in the past year, I have started to have this feeling towards plants and bugs. I've always had it towards animals, but the bugs thing has really come on strong. So where I live is by a river, and so we get a ton of spiders. Like, I mean, all sorts of kind. And I used to be one. I mean, I was taught that it was bad. You know, you could get bit, blah, blah, blah. So of course I'm going to be a certain way. But then all of a sudden I started to be another way for some reason, no reason, nothing happened. It just came out of nowhere. And I decided that I would just allow the spiders to be. Like everyone's saying, well, why don't you kill them? Like get them off your deck. Like they're over top of you. I'm like, but they don't bother me. They're not doing anything to me. They're doing what they do. And to be honest, what they really do is they keep the other bugs away. So I've just left them for, I'll be honest, of course I've killed bugs. I have. And I felt horrible about it. To be very honest, it does make me feel bad. I didn't know that was a real thing though, but I was wondering why all of a sudden I started to become this way. But I'm like that even with plants. Like I can't even throw a plant out. Like I can't break it. If I hurt a leaf, I feel bad about it. And I just didn't know that was a thing. So that's very, very, very interesting to me.
Okay.
Sorry, I went
Yeah,
on
look
there
into
for a
look
second.
into the Janes. They're the
I,
ones
I am. I
who
actually wrote that down because I honestly can't tell you where that even started to come from. That just came out of maybe my meditation. I'm not sure. But how would you describe what it actually feels like? I'm going to switch gears completely. How would you describe what it actually feels like to be out of your own body, like the texture, the atmosphere? Are you able to put that into words?
the first thing I thought when you said that was free. um, the a feeling of, well, the first things I always notice, yes, is that sense of freedom, but also almost like all the tension and stress and any everyday stuff just seems to dissolve away. Would be the first few seconds, I guess, in an experience
Mm-hmm.
like that. But yeah, then the next thing would be the different kind of relationship with the environment around me. I guess everything becomes alive, everything becomes vivid in a way that I can tune into that physically. I can go into a natural environment and kind of tune in, like in a trance or a meditation. I naturally go into trance states very fluidly. So I can do that. But in an out of body experience, it's like the filter's been taken away and suddenly everything becomes uh, really vivid and really alive and really interconnected. Because if you focus on something, I often use the
Mm-hmm.
example of a flower because this experience really stuck in my memory as well. Where I just looked at I was in the New Forest in this out body experience in England, and I looked at this flower, and it's like my whole consciousness went into this flower, and suddenly like the sustenance moving up the stem, um the sunlight hitting the leaves, the kind of, everything about this flower, I was suddenly like experiencing it. So it wasn't just seeing it. That's the thing. I think in out of body experiences, it's not just that you see things, it's that you live them, that you interact with them, that you
You
become sort of
feel them.
interwoven
Mm-hmm.
or interconnected with those things. And that's what's most profound about the experience. So I'm glad you asked that question, because that doesn't often come up when I talk about these things, but I think that's a really fundamental aspect of the potential of an out of body experience, that it teaches you something about reality because you're experiencing it in an unfiltered way. You're experiencing reality directly. And the more you work on your own consciousness through things like meditation and trance work and sensory deprivation and all these things that I like to work with, over time, I think that filter becomes less and less and less, and you're able to perceive more and more directly. And I think that's where the veridical experiences and even
Yeah,
doing science and things like that have come from, because it's that getting rid of that filter, it's kind of moving
right.
beyond that filter, and then the experiences really unfold for you.
Graham, when I hear you say that, that almost is like music to my ears. I also think what it brings to me is that why haven't we been living like this forever? Why are like I don't really know how to say that, but it just seems like there's so many personal accounts of OBEs and exploring consciousness, but still we're not really they're not mainstream is basically what I'm saying. And so why do you think that is? And why do you think it's holding us back? Like, what is it that's holding us back from a society, basically, from having these kinds of experiences? Because it really seems like that is our true selves.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just that our experience, our existence is dominated by so many distractions, be they survival, algorithms,
Right.
material gain, all the, just so many other things, even things that are completely positive, love and
Mhm.
relationships and friendships and, travel, nature, there are many things that both positive and negative that do dominate our attention. And it can be very hard to devote time and to put energy into these kinds of things. I mean, I know in my own life I've lived quite an unconventional life.
Mhm.
It's been that's really what's facilitated things in many ways, because I've never done a normal conventional job. I don't own a television. I
Oh,
like
I love it.
so many things
Wow.
about my life are not the norm. So, you know, which is positive, and again, there's positives and negatives. I don't have any children, for example.
Mhm.
Some people might think that's a shame. Maybe I will. There's still possibilities, but it's this thing of, I guess you have to make choices in your life, and some things will unfold and become a certain way, and other things will become a different way. Like when you open one door, you close another door, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
So I think it's partly all of that, why people are not perceiving these things, maybe. And then there's also, like I mentioned, we have this tendency as humans to project our own psychology, our own needs, and our own stuff onto
Right.
an experience that we have. So we might have a profound experience, but then we might want to interpret it in all different kinds of ways. There are many people who interpret their out of body experiences in more negative ways, for example.
Right.
So I see
Mhm.
them as life affirming, interconnected, and about just awakening and opening up who we are as human beings. Other people see them as a way of kind of accessing the matrix or something. So
Right.
there's different opinions about what you're actually experiencing and doing, I guess. So that can also have an impact on why people are not getting to that realization or understanding.
Yeah, I wish that people would more, though. It seems like they would be able to feel others more. And then wouldn't we be more conscious of how we're treating each other? Even how we're
Yeah,
treating the world, the planet, like yourself, ourselves, you know?
I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
and that's why I always think like, why are we not feeling these ways? Like when you speak to me about it, I get like goosebumps. I don't know. It just seems like that's usually a telling for me that something is pretty up my alley, I'd say, you know? So I always wonder why all these things aren't talked about enough. Like you have to dig a bit to to find this information. Maybe that's part of the plan though. Maybe you have to. Maybe it's just the way life is. And when you're ready, it shows itself to you. I don't know. But I wanted to dig in to your book, Avenues of the Human Spirit, because I really would love to know what inspired you to write it and what you'd hope people take away from your own journey through your experiences.
Well, the first book, I think I always knew I was going to write a book. Actually, that was always there. Um, Going back to the beginning, I guess when I was 14 and I started
Mhm.
inducing my own out of body experiences, I met the author and teacher Douglas Baker. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but um, he became my mentor basically. He gave me my first ever job as a kid, as a teenager, helping him with his astral projection lectures and in central London. So he used to do regular big talks on all kinds of different esoteric topics, but astral projection was one of his main ones. Um, so I guess I saw him as my mentor, and I just thought this is something I would like to do. I kind of looked
Mhm.
to what he was doing. He wrote an incredible amount of books, something like 200 books. He's a really prolific writer. Some of them are still in print. I think his astral projection one is still in print.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so he had a big impact on me in that sense, and I felt I want to write and I want to share these things. And I guess the first book I ever read on out of body experiences by a parapsychologist called Janet Lee Mitchell, I read that book as well, and that had such a big impact on me that I guess I thought I want to write because I want to have a positive impact on someone else. So
Mhm.
that was really part of what led to the writing of it. And then the experience I had in Sardinia, the kind of awakening experience, I think that was when I actually started to work on it. But it was over quite a few years before I actually completed it. I think it was probably about 7 years or something before I completed it. Um, and then I approached an agent and got a publisher for that book. And the first publisher that she put the book to didn't want the first book because they only do practical books. They only do manuals, basically, like practical manuals. So
Mhm.
they got back to me and they said, "Would you be interested in writing a practical guide on how to do this?" And as I had that intention already as well, um, it ended up that they commissioned me, Llewellyn in the US actually. They decided to commission me to write my second book. So that's why
Nice.
my first book and my second book came out just a year apart from
Oh.
each other, the original version. Because I've now just recently re-released a special edition of Navigating the Out of Body Experience. That's the second practical book. I just did a rewriting of it, added in new chapters, updated the science, etc. So I've just done that sort of this year, last year, this year. Um,
So exciting. Mm.
so yeah, so that's kind of how the books came about. So originally I was just writing the first one, but the second one came out. And what would I want people to, from Avenues of the Human Spirit? I think I would
Mhm.
really want people to get that sense of spirituality and to see the value of practicing these things. Many people ask me, like, what is the benefit of out of body experience? And I kind of say,
Mhm.
well, to me, it's you're getting direct experience of your consciousness, your spirit, if you want to call it that. You're having the most direct, profound experience of those things that you could possibly have. There's no other more direct way that you can connect with that than having an experience like that. So,
Mhm.
and by describing my journey and the insights and that interconnectedness that came from the experience, I hope that it might inspire other people to explore that essentially.
Oh, I think it has big time. What are you working on these days?
I am working on another book. Can't say too much about that yet because it's
That's okay. Sure.
but I am working on a new book.
Mhm.
Probably still be a couple of years. There's a lot of research to go into
Mhm.
that. It's a very yeah. It's there's a lot of science going into it, but it's actually quite spiritual. I
Mm.
think it will work with a lot of people. You can read it in a completely non-spiritual sense, or you can read it in a spiritual sense. It's kind of coming from
Okay.
both perspectives, which I guess is how I am as a person. I have the spiritual aspect and the more scientific aspect, and I don't see them as contradictory. I think that
Mm-hmm.
I actually see science. I often call it the purest form of meditation, because it's about seeing things as they really are, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I say that, I mean the scientific method. When I use the word science, I'm not talking about a body of belief or a
Okay.
institution or anything like that. I'm talking about the methodology of science, which is to try and uncover the truth of something, and
Right.
that's what interests me. So, so I'm working on the new book. I'm also doing some science, currently just doing a scientific paper that will help with research into out of body experiences. We're basically creating an OBE scale. So there's a thing called the Grayson scale that they use with near-death experiences, which helps to identify if someone's had a near-death experience. So basically, we're creating a scale that does the same thing, but for out-of-body experiences. So
Interesting.
that paper is nearly ready to go out. So that should be coming out in the next uh, few months, I would think. So that I'm working on, and just generally also working on a new a new protocol with my out of body experience teaching and that side of things, because I've uncovered some new areas, new research that I'm putting together into a coherent structure for my students, basically. So yeah, those are basically the things I'm working on.
And your courses?
Well, yes, I have an online course that people can just download, which is the Navigator course. It's available on my website. I have infraliminal sound technology, which is very effective in inducing the vibrational state and helping with out of body experiences, which is not binaural beats. People often assume it's
Mm-hmm.
binaural beat. It's not. It's a technology that I developed through my immersive installation projects and
Okay.
virtual reality projects and things like that, which is another thing we haven't touched on, but another thing that I've done. Um, so I developed them based upon infrasound and subliminal suggestion. So it's a kind of combination that
Mm.
creates the tracks. And then I also do one-to-one tuition, private tuition. And there's also a full course that's done on a one-to-one tuition level, but is a full course that also includes video classes and other things as well. So if people are interested in that, they can reach out and I'll give them the full details.
Okay. And can I touch back on the music? The music, sorry, Graham, but what was the name of it?
It's called infraliminal sound. So it's basically a combination of the words infrasound and subliminals. So I put the two together for infraliminal. Because I looked into various research on ways of inducing altered states of consciousness. And what I discovered is there's some research that suggests infrasound can have an impact in a similar way to electromagnetic fields can have an impact on people's state of mind. So, for example, people will, in an area where there's naturally high electromagnetic fields, people will have spiritual or ghostly type experiences.
Right.
Same is true in places where infrasound occurs. So it can happen, like infrasound can happen, for example,
Hmm.
you can, like a natural cave with running water can have very, very low frequencies, for example, just naturally. And these phenomena could be related to why people have more experiences in certain locations than in others, because it has
Okay.
an impact on our consciousness. So I started to research that, and over, cut a long story short, over a few
Yeah.
years, I developed the infraliminal technology. The first version was I built it into a big steel structure with a
Cool.
kind of floating platform, there's a picture of it on my website. It's called Epicene, the original version. And it's a sort of floating platform. It was attached to the frame with these very thin wires. So if someone laid on it, they basically felt like they were floating in space. So, which was useful for OBEs. And then I
Mm-hmm.
had an audio track, an early version of the infraliminal technology playing when they were on that. So I developed the first version of that around the same time as the Soho experience. So
That is
that was a
so interesting.
powerful year.
Wow, was it ever for you? Those are available on your website?
Yeah, the tracks are available, and there's an image of that structure is on my website as well.
I'm interested in those. Well, thank you so very, very much. I have one last question. Oh, I didn't ask you, what would be the best way for people to connect with your work? Would that be your website?
Yeah, my website's the best way.
Okay.
I've moved away a lot from social media, so really
Okay.
I do the occasional YouTube video, and but
Thank you.
generally my website is the main place that I put things.
Okay. And I will have a list of all that in the description box below for everybody. And I
Thank
have
you.
one, I actually have two questions.
Okay.
Graham, what is your favorite thing to eat?
Oh wow, that's a question I haven't
I
had
know.
before.
I thought so. I thought I'd throw
Curry.
you off a bit. Curry.
Yeah,
Nice. Okay.
yeah, I like
And our
spicy
last big
food.
question. Oh, so you ate like a king in India, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, I've been to India 3 times, so yeah,
Oh, wow. Real authentic food
yeah.
and very vegan, right?
Yeah, they're pretty good for vegan food
Yeah.
there. Yeah, everyone, the majority of the country are vegetarian, so
Hmm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
not too hard to get vegan things there.
Mm, sounds good. I like that too. If you could leave humanity with one message, something that you wish everyone would understand, what would that be?
Oh wow, that's a
That's a hard one, isn't it?
um. I guess what we've what the thread that's been running through the whole conversation, that idea
Hmm.
of the golden rule, that empathy. I
Hmm.
think really that's the core of it, but also that sense of freedom. I think that sense of not being limited by convention and social norms and all these kind of things that limit people and hold people back. I think, the ability to celebrate difference and to celebrate walking your own path.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you very much for that. And Graham, I want to thank you so much for being here, sharing not just your experience, but your wisdom and your heart behind them. It's clear your journey has been one of courage, curiosity, and deep integrity. I know our listeners will walk away with a lot to ponder, and I'm grateful for the light that you bring back every single time you return to yourself.
Thank you. That's very nice.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And to everyone listening, I hope today's conversation inspires you to trust your own journey and the unknown and stay open to the possibilities that await. Whether your path leads you to compassion or simply to courage to ask the questions, remember that returning to yourself is the greatest adventure of all. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of The Return. And if this conversation has sparked something within you, I invite you to like and subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment or even just an emoji. Every little interaction helps others find these conversations, and your feedback means everything to me. And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within you.